Welcome to the Map Your Career Resource Showcase. We're so glad to have you with us today. My name is Joe Taylor, and I serve as Communications Project Manager for the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County.
And my name is Heidi Sabeska. I'm a data analyst at the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County.
We apologize for any audio chimes you hear from people joining the webinar. We're recording this live, and we're still learning how to best capture that recording.
Yeah, so really quick before we get started, I just wanted to announce that we have physical books of Map Your Career that are being printed that we're going to distribute into the community. And then the website is live at mapyourcareer.org, and we're going to have a demo of that a little bit later in the presentation. So today we're going to do an overview of the history of this tool, the redesign process, and then we're going to do a walkthrough of the website itself, and then we'll have time for some questions. So thank you again so much for joining us. We're really excited to get started. So really quick, we are the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County, and we're a nonprofit that funds local workforce partners in career training, education, and other job-related programs. Those programs are employment-related. They serve youth, adults, employers, and our goal is a strong economy and self-sufficiency for every resident.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Map Your Career tool, this is something that the Workforce Development Council put together a number of years ago. We've had 3 iterations of the tool. The last one was from 2014, 2015. The tool itself is intended to illustrate examples of in-demand occupations and career pathways in some of the top industries across King County, as well as provide labor market information about those industries. All kind of with the idea in mind that career planning, thinking about job changes or going into a first job for a young person can be really overwhelming and stressful. And we wanted to take all the information that we have access to and work on putting together a tool that makes that process easier and lays out some next steps for how to move forward.
So really quick, on screen you can see the previous version of Map Your Career. It looks like it was made in the 90s. That's my personal opinion. We wanted to make it more visually engaging and more reflective of the reality of being in the work world. We knew that, for the realities of the classroom and for reaching like a younger audience, we needed something that was engaging and that, so, if you're looking for a job, you don't want to feel like you're looking for a job in the 90s. So.
On the screen, we have an example of what the web version of Map Your Career used to look like. It was not especially dynamic. It was mostly PDFs that had to be downloaded and just kind of represented the same thing that was in the print book. And we wanted to take advantage of the technology we have available. The world is much more web-based than it was. And so we wanted to bring the tool up to that standard and allow people to interact with it in the way that most people gather information now. So the process of kind of revamping and putting together this tool started with labor market information. We started with an understanding, trying to get an understanding of occupations that are growing, what industries are experiencing growth, and gathered that information and started to map it out. And that's kind of the version you can see on the left side of the screen here. The next step of the process was meeting with industry experts across the area to really ensure that the information that we were putting out reflected the realities of working in these different industries. Sometimes labor market information and codes and all the things that come along with that don't match job titles that are really used in industry. And so we culled all the information together that we got from focus groups and individual interviews with industry experts, and really used that to shape and refine the labor market information that we had gathered.
And then we came to a point where we had to figure out how we were going to put it all together. And we made the decision to design it internally. And I think that gave us flexibility to be thoughtful and really put the time that we needed into the resource. We were able to bring it out and do a lot of focus group testing on the design, make sure that it was readable, that it was accessible, that it made sense to people. And we were also able to test the voice, because we knew that we wanted the tone to be something that was accessible and that like really felt welcoming, because I don't think that it needs to be stated really that job searching is really stressful, and like any supportive voice along the way can be really helpful. And then the final piece that I think you can see on the slide is that we wanted to rethink the overall product of macro career, because career pathways aren't linear, and that's especially true in some industries. And so we started thinking about like less like here, go from job A to B to C, and more like let's like figure out how we can represent like all the different choices that you have along the way.
Another part of that I think is important is that a lot of skills are transferable between one industry and another. And so something that you'll see in the demo is that we utilized icons to represent different industries, and those icons will show up. For example, in healthcare, you might see the public sector icon, or information technology. Those icons indicate that if you're working in healthcare in an IT job, that doesn't mean that you have to be working in that particular field if it's not for you. That the skills that you gain through that work experience and education are transferable to different industries. And so people can start to get a sense of, if I've been working in this world, or this is the education and experience I have, here are all the different options that are open to me, not just in one field, but across many different industries.
Yeah, and so like jumping into these industry overview pages, we wanted to, you can see like the previous version on the left and then the current version on the right. We gave it a total facelift. We wanted to have more like relevant imagery like around the industry. We wanted to put ourselves in the shoes of like a young person looking at this, and really like incorporated more like data-driven storytelling with like not just putting numbers on a page, but being like, okay, how can these numbers really like tell you something like constructive about where this industry is going? And what we decided to do is have it be like a 10-year prediction, to really demonstrate like the opportunity of going into a specific industry. Yeah, and so we asked ourselves over and over again, like what information is important, what isn't important, and some of that information we kept, some of it we decided like maybe this makes more sense online. We'll get into that a little bit later. And so then with the maps, I mentioned it earlier, but we wanted to break away from that hierarchy, like you can see on the left with the old version, and embrace this more like layered approach without boxes and lines. And a really like a pivotal moment in the design process is we realized that a lot of the problems that we were having with trying to represent these different pathways in like a static like print format were problems that like board game designers had solved like years and years ago. And so we ended up actually taking a lot of cues from that design language, and you can see it in the design with like the little like education experience bars like that like have like little different levels, and then the way that the arrows like come out from the center, and even the way that like there's just like a start area, so like just as soon as you look at app, it's like, okay, this is where my eyes are drawn and I can work out from there. So there's a lot of information being presented to you, but you have like something to grab onto like right from the beginning. And then as Heidi was mentioning earlier, you can see those icons to show like different industries that you can transfer to. All right, and then we settled on, this is the final design of the map. So we settled on two basic shapes, a more circular one and then a rectangular one. And we decided like which shape applied to which industry based on the overall structure of the career pathways in that industry. So for example, healthcare is much less linear. You have like, you can really like the pathways that you can take like really vary depending on like how you like end up there. Whereas an industry like construction, you have a little bit more hierarchy. It's not totally linear, but we wanted to be able to show that there is like a bit more structure there.
The other part of this project that we ended up spending a lot of time on was kind of the worksheet and the information that and follows the career pathway maps and the industry one-pagers in the book itself. So if you think about this tool as kind of a compiled bunch of information, on the left we have the worksheet that was in our old version, and this worksheet was pretty simple. The idea being someone could sit down with this worksheet and map out the different steps that they wanted to take to achieve the career or whatever it is that they're working towards. And we wanted to provide a little bit more information. So in the beginning of the booklet, we have this getting started page that you can see on the right. And the idea with this worksheet is really to cue up thinking around values and things that are important to an individual person when thinking about a job. So you'll be able to see some of the examples a little bigger when we get into the demo, but thinking about, is it important that the work that I'm doing is kind of individual, or do I prefer working on a team? Thinking about those types of things that can be really important when choosing a job in an area of work to be in. And then the second part of that follows all the career pathway maps in the book. And this is a next steps page that lays out, after you've looked at all this information, what are the things that you need to be thinking about doing, and really making it into an ongoing process, finding a mentor, doing research. And so while this tool, the maps themselves are not comprehensive at all, or by any means, of the different occupations that are available, we do provide potential next steps for understanding more about what someone might need to do to get to where they want to be. And we really were thinking about this as a career planning process as opposed to just kind of the process of picking a job.
So yeah, just really quickly, in order to try to reach people in as many places as we can and reach people where they are, we developed a few different versions. Like we alluded to earlier, there's a print version and a web version, but then we also have a black and white print version that's available as a PDF, and it was designed with like high contrast readability in mind for the express purpose of photocopying, because we know that in a classroom, in a career counseling setting, like a lot of times you're going to have pages pulled out and scanned, and we wanted to make sure that this was a resource that really shined even in that scenario. And then in the web version, we wanted to make sure that it was accessible on mobile, which is not like typical for a lot of these types of tools, and we're really hoping that we can set that as a standard going forward, because when we're talking about youth accessing things, like that's the main way that they're accessing the internet. So we wanted to prioritize it. And with all that said, we're going to get into the demo. You can see on the top of the page that you can get to macrocareer.org. It's live right now, so if you want to follow along, you can. Otherwise, we're going to share that on the screen right now. So you can see, oh, hang on. We're at this webinar. So here we are on the home page. We wanted to not overwhelm you immediately. So if you hit start, you just come down and you can see the basic like first steps that you could take, like the what are my values, which is what Heidi was talking about earlier. And then how to read these maps, which I'll show you in a minute. It's just the basic overview of like how to actually read career maps. We have some intro stuff, and then if you want to, you can just jump straight into industries that you're interested in. And there's some resources down here, but I think we're going to check out one of these industries. So let's go to healthcare. And so you land on this page, and this is really focused on the industry itself. And if you're really antsy, you can jump straight to the map, but I'm going to go on the scenic route. So we start with this data infographic that we were talking about earlier, with these like current information about the industry, and then these predictions for like 2028 that really demonstrate healthcare is projected to grow a lot in the next 10 years in Seattle, King County. And then we have these are more like learning tools, like work areas, tools of the trade, for you to get a sense of like what kind of jobs these are, and familiarize yourself with what does this work actually look like. And then we have some data about like demographic data, and we decided to include age and education. And then we'll come back to this a bit, but we have a bit more data on another page, but we wanted to put it in the right context. And then now we get to the actual career map, and you can see that it's like nice and big and readable online. And you want to start like right here. You can see entry-level positions, and then you can see these different kind of sectors of the industry, and they're layered based on like the experience or education that you would need to get to those. And I'm realizing as I describe this that I completely skipped the how to read these maps page, so that might be helpful. This is a guide that we created to give you some basic information and vocabulary to, like, if you're coming into this cold and you don't know like necessarily what we mean when we say education, like you can see the definitions of these different degrees. You can see like how you're supposed to progress through the maps, and then you can like break down some of these vocabulary, like career pathways or wages or even industry. I think, you know, we're really trying to make it so you can come into this without a lot of like, you don't have to be someone that reads like labor data to understand how this all works. So yeah, so let's go back really quick. I mentioned earlier some of the demographic information, and I'm going to let Heidi jump in here. So we click on this demographics and more button.
Have access to more kind of labor market data, demographic data, then we had space to put on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And we wanted to have an additional space online where if people are interested in seeing those additional pieces of information, they're able to. And we also wanted to give some kind of comparison. So if you click on the little pill that Joe highlighted before on each industry page, or if you click on the population link at the top, the first thing that you'll be brought to is King County information. So this is general information about the population of King County. And then on the right, you're able to select different industries, and you can do a little bit of comparison between what does all of King County look like compared with healthcare, the folks who work in healthcare, or you can compare one industry to another, or just look at the information for each industry on its own. And I think this is probably a decent time to talk about updating information, just so everyone's aware. So the last version of Map Your Career was updated in 2014, 2015, I had mentioned earlier, and we were long overdue for an update. But this page in particular and this information as it's represented in other places on the website, we plan to update every year as the data becomes available. So different pieces of information come available at different points in time. But we do plan to update this stuff in particular every year moving forward.
So I just wanted to touch on some of these resources really quick. So we have this overview page where we link to some of the other like really great career planning resources that we have access to here, and that are like great public resources for like looking into like other aspects of your process. Like you can see like demand, you can like do like skills matching, you can like look into apprenticeship, labor market, and then we have the self-sufficiency calculator, which is another tool that we developed that helps you like determine like what wage you need to achieve in order to support like your family size or like what region you're living in. And then yeah, and then we've grouped them into like steps in a job search process. So yeah, so then you come to career coach at the end, which helps you really kind of actualize a lot of this information that you've been digging into.
And each of these sections match the way that some of the information is laid out on the what do I do next page. So if someone's looking at that page and is in kind of the research or the apply section or whatever, there's a place to go and look for additional resources within the tool itself.
Yeah, and just really, as Heidi said so eloquently earlier, it's like it's not a pick a job process, it's a career planning process. And then here's that values page that we were talking about a bit earlier. You can see we have these like 2 columns, and you can read a statement, and we really tried to make it so there weren't any wrong answers. You read both sides and you get a sense of like, okay, well, how do I feel? And then based on what you choose, it doesn't necessarily like mean, like it's not like it's telling you like, oh, that means that you have to go be a welder or like you have to be a naturalist or something. It's really like helping you to frame like what like where your work values are and how important they are to you and how important specific things are as you're beginning your career planning process. Yeah, and so I mentioned earlier we have PDF versions. You can download a full color version or a black and white version right from here. And then just wanted to show a few things. Like we have our about page, some general information, some information about where the data comes from, and then we just really want to thank all of the industry, education, and community partners that we've been meeting with for the last year to like work out this data for our focus groups, to like determine what the best way to present all this information is. We really would not have been able to do it without like the support from all these partners in the community. So like big thank you to everyone. And now we are going to take a few questions. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat. Let me make sure that I've got that up. Yeah, so yeah, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them right now.
We can start with a few questions that we got on Tuesday when we did our first webinar. One was, who is this product intended for? This is meant for anyone and everyone. Map Your Career contains lots of information that can be useful to a wide range of audiences. It can help with career planning, career advancement or changes, and provide general data about the economy and industries in King County.
And then another one, which is how did you select these industries, which that came up on Tuesday. And it's pretty basic. It was they're based on some of the industries that are like the most in demand in the region, either through like projected growth or in like high numbers of retirements, because you see like a lot of opportunity for young people to come into those industries if you have a lot of people leaving due to retirement. So yeah, we just ranked like about, I think it's 9 different industries that are, yeah.
And similarly, we got a question about how we selected the occupations. So we started with labor market data. I talked about this a little bit earlier, and then met with experts across the various industries to learn more and inform the process. We can't put everything that exists in all these different industries on the maps, but wanted to give an overview of some of the most in-demand jobs so that we're directing people towards things where there's need. And so another part of meeting with industry experts was that we wanted to make sure that we had a good understanding of what job titles really are used in the industry versus what the government might call a job classification, and just really trying to make sure that we have a good handle on kind of what it's like out in the real world for people.
So I have a question, which is there something I can use for engaging with middle school youth? And I think we really designed the resource itself to be like broadly accessible. I would recommend like starting with the values page, and I think that could be a great conversation starter in a classroom. And then from there, you could move into some like a little bit like more career level research with some of these industries. But I think that some of the career planning worksheets could be a great resource for a middle school classroom.
There is an additional question. Are there any resources that are particularly helpful for people who may not have much of a formal education or who may have other barriers to career entry and growth? And I think that's where looking at at the resource page, and I don't have it in front of me right now, looking at all the different things that we link to. Some of those show places that people can go to get some more education or credentials and help kind of say, this is where people are at right now, here's where we're trying to get, and some of those resources will help fill in that gap in the middle of how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, I mean, in some industries, I think different industries have different like requirements around like education versus experience, and so like digging into that information could give you a sense of like where there's opportunity. So I had a question, labor market data info, is it current data or how old is it? Which I think, Heidi, you're the best to answer that question.
The labor market data that we have represented for the most part is 2018 data. So in order for us to pull the information and have it be kind of a complete picture, a full year has to pass. So it is through the end of 2018 with the exception of education. So when you look at the specific industry one-pagers, you'll see that education has 2017 on it and everything else has 2018. Education is the one thing that's lagging behind. So as I had mentioned with updates moving forward, I believe it's June or July that the education information that we have access to gets refreshed. So as soon as we have that, we'll apply that update, and we'll do that moving forward. As soon as we have updated information, we'll apply that.
Yeah, I think it's important now that we've like redesigned this resource, we're really trying to look at it as a platform. And so when we have like new information and new data, we can work that into like this version and hopefully be able to do it on a timely basis.
And so we've talked about updating industry information, but we haven't really talked about updating the occupation can't talk today. Occupation information. That'll depend how much things change year over year. There are some industries that change much more rapidly than others. And so as part of the annual review process, we'll look at the data that we have access to, and again, talk with people in industry to understand if the information that we have depicted is still the most accurate, or if there are things that need to change. And so I anticipate moving forward, some industries may change more frequently than others, and we're gonna try to stay on top of making those updates.
So I have a question. Many careers in construction overlap in maritime, such as welder. Does this tool show that overlap to inform viewers that there are additional opportunities?
Yeah, so we had touched on this a little bit earlier, but one thing that we added to each of the career maps is some icons, and I think there's a key in the bottom left corner, and then for the circles, you'll see icons around the outside of the circle, and on the more rectangular shape, you'll see the icons on the far right side. So what we try to do is use, for example, we have a little sailboat icons for maritime, and anytime that a maritime related job shows up in a different industry, then we put that little sailboat on that part of the industry. So we've attempted to give that representation through those icons. And one thing that we're wanting to do moving forward on the online version is make those icons interactive. So if you were on, let's say, the construction page and you saw the little sailboat, you could click on that and it would take you over to the maritime page. So we want to build in that interactivity, but those icons are there and represented.
So a question, yeah, are there links provided to where the training for a specific career pathway would be located locally? And I think that's another instance where a resources page points to that. I don't remember which one specifically is it. I believe it's
Career Bridge that highlights the institutions that provide different types of training.
Yeah, I think that's right. So you could take what you like. So we see Map Your Career as really being a step on a career planning process. So if you like start with Map Your Career and you find some things that you're interested in, then you could go to some of those resources and be like, okay, well now what are actual training programs that I can do, and like are there ones that are near me? And you know, and hopefully this would be an area where like a career counselor or a teacher or some other kind of facilitator can use these different resources in concert to inform like a more holistic process. Let's see. So this is one we got on Tuesday, but I think it's fun, so I'm going to answer it again. What's with the cat? And you know, you can see there's a cat on your screen, and that's Maggie, is our coworker's cat. And the cover art, it's kind of a funny story. The cover art for Map Your Career was like shot by us. I mentioned that we did the design internally, and we were trying to stage a lot of, like kind of a career job search scene with like a table and like a computer and the different things that like might be present while you were looking for a job. And in the middle of that very serious process, we had Maggie decided to just walk into it and posed. And so we took a few pictures with Maggie, and then as more as a joke than anything, but then when we took it out to the focus groups, especially with youth, they like really responded like quite positively. And so we decided to keep her, and now she's become quite famous.
Well, I think unless anyone else has any other questions, that's all we have for today. We are working on building an additional link on the webpage itself to submit additional questions or feedback, or if anything comes up as everyone's reviewing. So we'll have that up soon. And
we're also going to post the written answers to a lot of the questions
Yeah.
that we received today and Tuesday on that,
as well as this recorded webinar if you want to pass this along to anyone. So thank you everyone for your time. Take some time and poke around on the website, and we hope you like the redesigned Map Your Career.